Bridges, with your host, Doni Miller, connecting our community with information about issues and opportunities.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to Bridges. I'm so glad to have you with us today. My name is Doni. We are today continuing a conversation that we started last week, and it's about this whole issue of the possibility of closing local homelessness shelters and a redirection of the way the city intends to support those in our community who are unhoused. I suspect that my guest this morning, someone that we all know in this community quite well, an unceasing advocate for this particular issue, Ken Leslie, who is with an organization called One Matters, will say that this is a conversation that the community absolutely needs to be involved in.
Absolutely, 100%, because it's going to affect really, many families. We just don't know who, because everybody thinks that homelessness will never affect them and never can affect them. But if you went into Family House Shelter and ask all the people there how many thought they would ever become unhoused, you wouldn't find anybody.
You wouldn't find anybody, yeah.
On your agenda.
Let's talk a little bit about your street cred in this, as we were talking, calling it a little earlier. You are the founder of an organization called One Matters, because you're certainly around a long time before One Matters, working on this issue, consistently working on this issue, Tent City, and lots of great stuff focused on just bringing attention to this issue of folks who are unhoused. But let's talk about One Matters for a second.
Sure. It's, all of the efforts, I think, since 1990 when we started this was about bringing people together and coming together as communities. So much so that in 2008, John Mellencamp came to our little Tent City thing. It was really
I remember
impressed.
that.
He was
actually,
really impressed with what we do, and that's how One Matters was formed. And since then, he's continued as a shepherd in many ways in helping us get visibility and viability. And he'll be doing more stuff for us this year as well. So we're really blessed to have that level of support. Several people from the music industry have joined us. Last week, we filmed ZZ Top, who are going to be spokespeople for their first spokespeople. There's several others we're going to be taping shortly. For our Veterans Matter program, we have what we're calling a 60,000 Soldiers campaign that we started. So, I mean, we do a lot of stuff, and all of it's about bringing people together.
And I love your mission, because it starts off with dignity.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, that's the first piece of this. It's all about the dignity of the folks that One Matters is trying to serve.
Absolutely. And the problem with this conversation is everybody's talking about the money and the pots of money and the agencies. And you don't hear anybody talking about the people that are going to be affected.
Well, let's talk about the conversation for a second. So, from your perspective, what exactly is going on here?
They try to make it sound so complex. There's three separate issues here, and that's why it gets so confusing. The first issue is the CDBG funding, Community Development Block Grant
funding. Sure.
And for the public to understand that we'll call that the federal big pot. And it became the federal big pot when there used to be a lot of federal little pots that they combined, and that's where the block name comes in. Now, one of the pots was dedicated to serving the unhoused, serving the homeless shelters, making sure communities had a response to that. Over the years in that they were all put together, and over the years in that big pot, the money that went to homelessness was taken out of that and given to the City of Toledo for Department of Neighborhoods and to the developers, et cetera, et cetera, reducing the amount for homelessness. This year it was proposed that, according to the Citizens Review Panel, they said that the shelter should have gotten about 5% of the 6.2 that comes in, or 8.2, whatever the number is, this year.
Citizens Review Panel, for people who don't know, is a group of community folks who take a look at the applications for funding for block grant monies.
Absolutely. Okay. So as a community, what we do is we take them to a Citizens Review Committee and a Department of Neighborhoods Committee and say, hey, what is the best way to spend this money? What agencies can really do it well? They come back with recommendations. They recommended, first of all, that Aurora Project was the top in points for both the City of Toledo's assessment and the Citizens Review Committee. Bethany House was one of the top of the people that are really serving it well.
And these are shelters.
They're the shelters here in Toledo. And Family House also was in that top, and number 7 was Focus. So, just using those 4 agencies as an example, that's what the Citizens Review recommended. For some reason, and this is what confuses everybody, out of the Department of Neighborhoods came the proposal to not fund any of the shelters from that CDBG pot, from that big pot.
But the reality is, as I sat in some of those council meetings, the director, those were big fun. The director of the Department of Neighborhoods, Lourdes Santiago, said that there was adequate funding for those shelters in the ESG
Right, which
funding.
we'll call pot number
Emergency
2.
Shelter Grant.
It was,
Fund.
and now they're calling it Emergency Solutions Grant,
Okay.
which will dovetail into issue 2, which is where the funding is going. But the reality is there wasn't enough money in the ESG funds, the Shelter Solutions, whatever you want to call it, to be able to compensate. Now, what they've done is essentially, no matter what you want to call it, they want to take the money that's been dedicated to help Family House stay open. The $26,000 that they defunded from Bethany House paid for their case manager. So they're not getting ESG funds now. They couldn't apply because they didn't qualify.
Right.
So, they're saying these things, and it makes sense to the community, it makes sense to everybody, but the fact is they want to take the money dedicated to homelessness that we pay our taxes to and give it to the city of Toledo and all the other
Well,
entities.
but somebody would say, and what would you say to somebody who said to you, look, we are really only dealing with 1,000 folks in town who are unhoused, but there are millions of dollars going into the operation of shelters, millions of dollars, and isn't there a more effective way to do this?
I'm not sure that that's true, because the reality is,
Yes, there are.
fly, Attack of the Killer Flies.
Leave your pets at home.
From last week, I think. The reality is, you say 1,000 people, but that's from the point in time survey.
That is from the point in time survey.
Tonight there were 1,000 people on the streets. Now the shelters, according to the statistics that we have, have a 4.8 turnover in their beds. So if you multiply that 1,000 times 4.8, that's how many people have become unhoused in Toledo over the course of the year. Now, what's stupid is part of this debate is about, like, Family House. Well, they were on last week, so I'll use them as an example.
Right.
The TLC, Toledo Lucas County Homelessness Board, which is led by Deb Conklin and Kyle Grief, who was here last week, represents TAYA. They're supportive of these shelters being defunded. Now, they're not going to say that verbally, but there was no protest. TAYA was not able to protest the TLC
but Debbie
board.
Conklin would say, and there's a Blade article that I found in, I think it was in May of this year, where you and Deb Conklin were prominently featured in the front of this article. That was a great hat you had on in that picture too. But she said in that article that this is not her doing. This is a redirection by HUD. So all of this is HUD's redirecting the way that the homeless in this community should be managed.
Right. That's not true. But let me just finish up issue 1, which is CDBG funding. So Citizens Review said that Department of Neighborhoods then says no. We want it to go to ESG, and now there's some are saying the general fund, which again is still taking it out of the big pot that was intended for the homeless. Now, the reason they'll take it into any of those, either the ESG or the general fund, is because those would be temporary. They're saying, well, we're only going to do it for 1 year. So what they're saying is, yes, we're going to close the shelters, but we're going to do it a year from now. We're going to defund them, and they either sink or swim. Now, I believe that as a community, we have the obligation to provide for that. If your family, if it was your daughter or your son who becomes homeless in 3 years, and the 90 beds in Family House no longer exist and it's closed, where will they go?
Is the idea, though, that that the shelters are to be closed, or is the idea that they want to redefine, realign the services that are being provided? Because there is some discussion about centralizing the point of entry into the system as a way to make sure that people are getting the services they need more efficiently. So maybe someone doesn't need to go to a shelter. Maybe they need other kinds of services. So the shelter is not the point of first choice.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. They're all using the terms housing first. So if you become unhoused, you're immediately going to get into a place. That's no way. How can I get you, if your family become unhoused today, how can I get you into an apartment tomorrow? How can I get you in a place tonight? It's not going to happen. They're going to close the shelters. So that eliminates that safety net that you have to be able to land.
Are they closing the shelters, or are they simply reducing the amount of time that people can stay in the shelters?
Well, and that's wonderful. They're coming up with that money, but now we're going into pot 2 that we were talking about, the emergency shelter grant. They added a little bit of money. So usually, let's say we get $1 for that pot. They've added another quarter to the pot, and they're saying that they're doing that to get people into rapid rehousing. Now, the housing, you talked about the intake, housing first is the model that they're trying to say, which is illogical, irrational, and will kill people, because you will not be able to house people in a place immediately.
Who is the they that you're talking about?
If the shelter's closed and it's your child, your son, your daughter that becomes unhoused, and Bethany House is closed for domestic violence, Their stated plan is what they call diversion, which sounds great, right? Instead of going to the shelter, they're going to be diverted. But their stated plan is to divert them to the Cocoon in Bowling Green. That's what they actually said. So what does that mean if it's your daughter? That means she's going to go from Lucas County, where all the services are.
Now, who said that? Who said they were going to?
Santiago said that in a meeting to Kathy Griffith with Bethany House.
So that the plan would be to divert people from Lucas County to the Cocoon, which is a shelter in Wood County,
which only has like 12 beds or something, and it's always full. And it's illogical because the solution to rural homelessness in these outlying counties is to send them to Toledo. So, you know, it's not well thought out. It's great ideas, but it's not well thought out.
But couldn't the presumption be made that for someone to say that we are going to divert those folks who are homeless from Lucas to Wood County, that there would be a set of services, wraparound services provided to those people to keep them from having to leave the county to begin with? In
theory, tell me how it's going to work.
Okay.
They haven't done that.
Okay.
So what we the people that are involved in our group with Cherry Street and the others that are actually on curb level are talking about what we call the Housing Next concept. You come to me, and the central access
What's it called again?
is about Housing Next.
Housing Next, okay.
You come to me, central access is where the ongoing point, but what do you really need? They're trying to put everybody into housing. Well, if you need recovery services, we're going to divert you over here. If you're mentally ill, we're going to divert you over to St. Paul's. If you just need a place for a few days, we'll send you to emergency house or beach house. Now, as far as the issue about how many nights people stay there, the policies of Family House is for people to stay up to 90 days.
Right.
So that's what they're attacking. But the reality is most of the people that go to Family House are back into housing in 39.3 days. So that's the reality of it versus what they'll allow. So they're already doing it. Now, the extra money that comes in from this second pot, that should be used to get more of those people into housing quicker, because for a lot of people, it's a financial issue. They don't have the security deposit. They've got back utilities that prevent them from getting into a place. So those are the kinds of things that often prevent people from leaving the shelters immediately into housing.
So go back out, yeah.
Yeah, that extra money is great. HPRP was a great program.
I wish you to hold on to that thought. When we come back, we're going to take a little break right now, but when we come back, I want to ask you, why should the community care about this? I mean, what's in it for them?
I got 3 minutes to think of an answer.
Okay, great. And in those 3 minutes, we're going to go pay some bills. We will be right back. You hang tight.